You're listening to the House Hacking Podcast, the blueprint for one of the best financial life hacks there is. House hacking. If you are looking to get ahead financially or learn about the easiest way to get started with real estate investing, then you are in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of individuals from all walks of life that use house hacking to eliminate their housing costs and accelerating their path to financial independence. Your number one place for all things house hacking.
Bradley, man, it's been way too long. I know we've been planning this for, almost a year, but we finally got you on. I'm excited to have you. I mean, for folks that don't know you, man, who are you? Where are you calling in from?
Yeah, I appreciate the persistence. I know you and I are both very, very busy, and so I appreciate that. It's been a busy year for me. I'm in Metro Detroit area, greater Metro Detroit, closer to kind of the Flint area, if people are familiar with that. And so, yeah, great people out here, great community to invest in, and so my wife and I have enjoyed it.
Awesome. I know a lot about your experience, but for folks that don't, I mean, we'll get into the house hacking side of things, and we'll get into some nitty gritty on a lot of lessons learned, because you got a ton of experience in, just a few short 6-7 years. But I mean, give folks this high level overview of when did you start investing, and what were a couple of the highlights over the past sort of 7 years or so?
Yeah, so again, appreciate you having me on. I'm sure a lot of people are unfamiliar with who I am. My buddy Drew and I, we started House Hacking Success, which is very similar. You get what you have done. It's amazing to see the growth you've had within your community, and that's just what we've tried to do too. So really, it started out. We just wanted to find some people, hopefully locally in the state. We didn't know how many people were also house hacking. We'd heard the term and all of that, and it's kind of awesome to have had a relationship with you and other people around the country. So it's a lot of fun. But for me personally, it started out back in 2014. My first deal wasn't so great. So I went from that into kind of a live-in flip, a sort of house hacking. And so I flipped that house. I developed a partnership and started flipping properties there. But ultimately, I didn't love the capital gains aspect of doing all this work on a property. And I was doing a lot of the heavy lifting, of course, the HVAC and electrical and stuff. I hired professionals, but a lot of the heavy lifting stuff that just took some, elbow grease, I was there doing. And I got to the end of it, and it kind of, it sucked, giving 20% of that gain away, or, and sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little less. And so I just started, just reading, figuring out what I could do. I mean, I hear all these things about people, not paying taxes on real estate, and I wanted to figure out how that was, and started talking to CPAs and stuff. And I stumbled on the concept of it wasn't even called this, but kind of like the BRRRR house hack combination. Yeah. So I knew a little bit what I was doing about rehabs, and it really intrigued me that you could kind of combine the two. And so I stumbled upon the 203K loan. I knew nothing about it. I knew no one that knew anything about it. My lender, told me he knew something about it. He knew nothing. He ended up knowing nothing about it. My realtor knew nothing about it. Very few people do know about it. And so we can talk about that, because there are ways to find the people that are doing it successfully. And there's a government website that you can go to and find the lenders and yada, yada. But back then I didn't. So I took a 3-unit, turned it into a 4-unit. To this day, it's still the best investment that I've done, probably the best investment I'll ever do. But I kind of combined the two. I did about $30,000 from the bank. And so there's two separate types of FHA 203K loans. There's a streamlined version and there's a jumbo version. And so really if you're over $30,000 in a rehab, you just take the larger portion, and they'll give you somebody that actually oversees it. They call it a consultant, a HUD consultant that'll actually oversee the project for you. And I've never liked red tape. And so I looked at that version. I'm like, man, that sounds like a lot of work. So I had a bunch of money saved up from some of my flips. So I just said, all right, I'll do 30 grand to get this place back to what they consider livable. And then I'll put about 45 grand of my own money into adding the 4th unit and yada, yada. So I did that. And, from there, my wife and I kept, investing. We bought a side-by-side, condo-style duplex, to where we still live to this day. So it's been a couple of years that we've been in that place. We just had our first kid, so it works out. It's it's a nice size. My wife feels comfortable. My wife come from one of the top, the top suburb of Michigan, sort of, and so I didn't know how that all feel for her, but she enjoys it. We're raising our kid there. So we feel comfortable there. So now we're investing strictly as investors. We bought a triplex. We're in the middle of closing on a commercial building. We're flipping properties and things like that. So there's kind of a high level overview of kind of the story. There's obviously nitty gritty stuff. I sell several million as an agent too. So, we can go into whatever direction we want, but really the moral of the story is our progression was we wanted to figure out ultimately how to get me out of my corporate job. And so I officially left that job. And ultimately I wanted to last in this, being an entrepreneurial and being somebody that somewhat, early retired, because I see all these people, they do entrepreneurial ventures, but they get wiped out by outside circumstances. And I didn't want to be one of those people. And that's ultimately what I think house hacking provides.
Yeah. Awesome. A lot in there. So, I mean, what were you doing in 2014 when you decided to do this first flip? I mean, you mentioned a corporate job. So what type of work were you actually doing? And were you dating at this point, or were you and your wife already married, or had y'all not even really met?
Yeah, we hadn't met. We didn't meet until 2018, my wife and I. But yeah, so I had dropped out of college. And so I got into just construction, low level, just laborer, and I kind of worked my way up in that field at first when I was younger. And so I had saved up enough money to buy a rental, and that's all it was. And so found this rental. It was inexpensive, but it had been completely gutted. Somebody went through there and took out all the copper and yada yada yada. So we put this house back together, new plumbing, electrical, and put a tenant in there, and the tenant ultimately got murdered. And so tenant got murdered, people broke in there, stole everything again. We had a national water crisis. And so it was just a perfect storm. And so I had lost all that money initially. But I was young enough, and I had been, I've been an athlete my whole life. And I guess the moral of being an athlete is always just that, there are people that win, there are people that lose. And if you're one of the ones that lose, is because you didn't prepare hard enough, or you didn't know enough about, your opponent or whatever. And so that's how I internalized it. I realized that I needed to figure out real estate. It wasn't that real estate didn't work. It was that I didn't know what I was doing. So I kind of stepped back, got introduced to some great people, and just kind of picked their brain, and got into flipping. And from there, I recovered.
Yeah. So, I mean, what was the original motivation to actually get into real estate investing then? And I mean, obviously house hacking wasn't quite on the radar, but it was more of rental in flipping. I mean, had you read any books? I mean, had you just heard of hey, I'm tired of these lower level, more traditional jobs. I want to get ahead financially. What actually caused the spark or the change? And was it something that happened in a short period of time, or is this just, over a 2 or 3 year sort of longer period?
That's a good question. I knew people, wealthy people had real estate, I guess. I did read Rich Dad Poor Dad, like most other people do and such. But I think I just understood that, and so I just decided to do it. I didn't put a whole lot of thought into it. I certainly didn't think about. I didn't have a good enough job to leave or anything like that. And after I had lost that money, I'd found a job for one of the big three, and in the automotive industry, and kind of worked my way up there, and got to the point in the last couple of years where I had a great benefits and high paying job and yada yada. But yeah, it was just something to where I just knew wealthy people in real estate, and so so that's why I did it. And then after I got in there and established at this job and realized that ultimately I wanted to be more of an entrepreneur, and the path of the safe, easy job wasn't the way I wanted to go, that's when I really I set this goal that kind of scared myself that I'd leave that job by 30. I'm 27. I just left. And so, that's really was the inspiration then. And that's where we started to house hack more intentionally and build a portfolio and really be intentional about our spending and our lifestyle and waiting, with the ultimate goal and I tell a lot of people, my wife and I, ultimate goal is we're going to buy some land and build a custom house. And that's always been the goal we've had. And that's what allows us to be strategic about what we do today. be strategic about continuing house hacking, be strategic about, having solid reserves and having, our portfolio. A lot of people over leverage. We certainly don't. We like to have, we wanted to make this a 50-year trajectory rather than, a 5-year, like, a lot of entrepreneurs in and out. And so we started out with low down payment loans, FHA and all of that. But we were strategic about building equity in through sweat equity and strategically paying them down so that we had, 30-year notes, fixed rate, there, but we also had solid cushions to where if anything happened economically, we'd survive. So we've been very strategic about that, but we had that ultimate goal of, one day we're going to build that house that we want to live, the American dream in, but we're going to take a 5 or 10 year plan to get there.
Awesome. I mean, you've got like this ton of great experience. There's all these little pieces I want to pull out here. So, I mean, you just sort of like this rolled right out. It's like, I had this bad deal. Someone was murdered in it, and the house was just gutted. All the copper was done. I mean, like, was this in just a bad part of town? Like, I mean, how'd you do that deal, and how'd you get out of it? I mean, did you end up selling it? I mean, this is like, I mean, how do you even deal with that? I mean, hopefully no one that's listening is ever going to have to deal with a murder, but there's bad things that happen. Like, I mean, I was doing due diligence on a property under contract, SWAT rated it. I've heard of people die in other people's units, but I mean, like this, there's got to be some lessons there. Like, was it just the bad part of town? Like, how'd you get through that?
I don't know if it was necessarily the bad part of town. It ended up being his girlfriend that did it. And so, but ultimately, I mean, the moral of the story that I learned is that I wanted to go to a higher end clientele, overall. And so this person was somebody that had worked for me and things like that. But I just wanted to get to a higher clientele. I like the idea of flipping, and I like the idea of buying for value rather than just cheapness. So I guess those are some of the lessons that I learned. There was somebody that ultimately became one of the big mentors in my life, and he's the person that I partnered with in flipping. He's the person that I ended up buying the duplex from on seller financing. He's the person that I'm now buying the commercial building on. He's going to hold the note. So he's become an incredible resource for me. And I didn't mention this earlier, but I just started working for him for $10 an hour. That was one of my first jobs. I said, I'll do all the dirty jobs for you.
Yeah.
So just for people out there, like those kind of connections, you go do some of the tasks for others out there who are the heavy hitters in your area. Generally speaking, you'll come back around to you. So just but that was some of the lessons. I asked him one thing. I said, listen, this obviously didn't work out for me. What's the one thing you could tell me that would help me? And he's like, go buy the worst house in the best neighborhood. So ultimately, that's what I went ahead and went and did throughout everything that I've done. And so I went and flipped the house. Worst house in the best neighborhood. That became a great property for us. Went and bought a lake house, worst house in a great lake area. Became a great flip for us. And so I just continued that triplex. That's in a residential area of town. So it's all these newer 15, 20-year-old homes that are all easily worth over $300,000. And then there was this completely just it was a 3-unit. Turned it into 4-unit, but it had mold in it. There was about 50 raccoons that had eaten their way out in several spots of the roof. I mean, it was a disaster of a home. But I found the worst house in the best neighborhood, and rehabbed it. And to this day, I mean, the cash flow in that place, has set us up very well.
Yeah. So that original one was okay area, not the best area, but challenge with tenants, and that made you move to a higher set of clientele. And then, from that you started, you partnered with the guy you used to work for and who became your mentor. Did he partner with you on the live-in flip you did back in 2015, or was that sort of on your own while you're building the relationship with him?
Yeah. So I was on my own. And I love taking people to lunch. I constantly take people to lunch that I just want to learn from in all sorts of industries. And so relationships has always been a key for me. Playing high level college football and things like that. I learned I was the relationship aspect of the team orientation. I was always one of the ones that was in the mix of building culture and things like that. So that was kind of inundated within me growing up. Building culture in a team. Creating those relationships. So I just carried that over to this industry. And so after I did that live and flip by myself. It was a conventional loan and had one of the worst roofs I've ever done. So what I did was I actually had to close with an escrow on that one, which I don't believe they do anymore. But it was sometimes with credit unions, I always tell people, first-time home buyers, they have some great products. If it's a local property, they have vested interest in helping that area, so they'll do some creative things. So they helped me close with an escrow for the roof. We can get into that, but so that was solely on my own. After I had made about 60 grand, I think, on that deal, I took him out to lunch, and I just said, hey, I just want to pick your brain. Like, you gave me some great insight as far as buying the worst house in the best neighborhood. Just I can't even remember what the conversation was, but I just bought him lunch, picked his brain, told him I had X amount of dollars, like just ask him what he would do with it. 2 nights later, he calls me and said, hey, come invest in me. Let's go 50-50, and you be the point man as far as doing the majority of the work. And so that's just kind of how that relationship started.
Well, I mean, there's this old saying, I don't know if you've heard it, but it's, you ask someone for money, they give you advice. But if you ask someone for advice and you actually take action on it, then they end up giving you money. And it sounds like this is exactly what happened here. It's like, hey, what's some advice? What can I do different? He saw you actually took action on it and you were successful. And now he's like, oh man, I got this young buck here who's excited. He's actually listening. And now you had this great partnership opportunity that came about. Such cool stuff. So, you started doing more partnership deals with him. Did you know what house hacking was at this point? I mean, it started getting big around 2018, 2019, or did the mentor tell you about, like, go buy this triplex and live in a unit, or go buy a multifamily and live in a unit? I mean, how did that go from flipping into doing this first house hack?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I certainly didn't know what house hacking was. I had heard about the 203K loan, and so that sort of intrigued me. And so actually, when I bought it, I was in contract with two houses at the same time. I was in contract with a single family home, and then I found this triplex, this triplex at the same point, and we made an offer and end up getting it. So I don't really know that I knew house hacking was, but I instinctively knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur for a really long time, and that just meant I needed to cut my expenses. So I don't really remember how I stumbled upon house hacking and all of that. I know I was reading a lot. I know Brandon Turner mentioned it a lot. The house hacking in itself didn't intrigue me that much. Combining the aspect of building a lot of equity with the ability to live for free is really what intrigued me. So the 203K loan is really what intrigued me. Buying a duplex, back then I don't think it really intrigued me. It was the ability to do both: build equity, burr, like a lot of people say, and then live for free. And so when I was living there, after I'd made that fourth unit, I was making $1,000 a month. So it ended up while I was living there. So it was a good situation.
So let's. There's so much I want to get into on this deal. So, you had mentioned it a little bit when we first started talking, but I know you've had Matt Portico on your show. We had him on to dive deep on the 203K loan. So I don't want to get into too much of the nitty gritty on that stuff. But so you realized, hey, if I go above this $30,000 threshold, it's going to be a lot more work. Did the lender tell you, or did you just sort of know or instinctively know, like, they're not going to pay for me to turn it into a 4-unit? So I'm going to use the FHA 203K funding to fix up the 3-unit, and then I'll use my own cash to turn it into a 4-unit. I mean, was the goal when you're going into it, you realized, like, hey, this property could be 4 units? I mean, like, what made this property really hit for you, or how'd you think about that fourth unit?
Yeah, so something we didn't touch on, and I touch on a lot with whether it's new clients that I'm meeting with or on the show, on our podcast, getting around people that think bigger than you, is obviously cliche, but, and so reading and stuff like that's great, but actually having personal experiences with people in your market that are big hitters that are doing these things will change your life. So for instance, that person I partnered with on flips, he would go into projects and for instance, the ones that we did, and he would literally change the entire, landscape of a property. So we took, for instance, a 2-bedroom, 1-bath on this lake, and we turned it in 3-bed, 2-bath, but we completely reconfigured the whole house. we put the kitchen on the other end, and that just blew my mind. I had never experienced that. I never heard of anything like that. I didn't know you could do it.
So he knew, like, we can increase the value by turning this from a 2-1 to a 3-2, and you're learning as he's awesome.
I mean, he's a big hitter. He owned a huge portfolio. He had he was flipping several a year, right? He was one of the ones that is active in the market and all of that. And I'm a newbie. I've done a couple deals, but I mean, I really don't know. I don't have my bearings in there. And so that's how I got the idea of being creative, like adding value, force appreciation, not only through sweat equity, but through strategic force appreciation, like bedrooms, like creating open floor plans, right? Like some of these things that can really genuinely add value and get you to a higher clientele. So that's what he taught me. So then when I started looking at properties, after that, that's what I, from that experience with him and how he would strategically add value that way, I started doing that. So I walked in this 3-unit and I see this 1-car garage. It was on the side of the house. You couldn't really even get, like, I had a beat up Cobalt at the time. I don't even, it was a tight turn to get my Cobalt in there. It was more of like a lawn, you got your weed whip and your mower and stuff you could put in there. And then there was a 12 by 12 room. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, I could put a bathroom there, a kitchen there, and have a 1-bedroom studio for myself while I rent the other ones. And so that was the inspiration. And I knew enough at the time to know that if I get a bank loan that is that is going to take forever and has a ton of loopholes, combined with the township, which is always slow, and this and that, like this could be a nightmare if I try to add this, with the loan. So I'm just like, I have the money, I'll do this. You get the other. At the time, it was just 2 units that I need to do to get FHA approval. You do the exterior in those 2 units. I'll take care of adding the unit and the other unit. So it ended up being about $30,000 from FHA and about $45,000 out of pocket for myself. And it's ultimately over the course of the last 3 years, it's tripled in value, and it's been a great investment.
And what was the makeup of the 3 existing units? Were those 1-1s, 2-1s, different sizes? Yeah, so it was a
3-bed, 2-bath. Was the large unit, and then a 2-1 and a 1-1. And then the unit I added was like a studio 1-1. So
yeah. And then what'd you end up buying that one for?
$105,000. And so bought it for $105,000 from the bank. Like I said, it had mold. It had raccoons eating out of the attic. It was pretty messed up place. I had to rip out. It had a boiler system, so I ripped out the HVAC, redid all the wiring, redid all the plumbing, yada yada, and put about $75,000 into it total. And right now it's worth about 3.25. So.
Yeah, I mean, you're in it for $175 and it's worth 3.25. And what are you getting for? I know you mentioned you're making about $1,000 a month on living for free. What are you getting for each of the units now? What's your gross on that rental property?
Yeah, so it's over $3,500 a month, fully rented, and we bring home about $2,000 a month now. So
awesome. And when you were looking at that one, I mean, obviously you saw the value add potential. Was your goal to make this into a long-term rental of like, hey, I'm going to live here for free for a while, and then it'll be a long-term rental when I'm done with it?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. When you're younger, I'm sure a lot of people can appreciate that. Like, you think about the future, you think about building a portfolio. But at least for me, like, I'm very conservative individual. I'm very like down-to-earth individual. I'm very like, let's take one step at a time and make sure this can actually come to actuality. Like, I do enjoy dreaming big and all the, a lot of the fluff stuff, but like a lot of that also to me is kind of like, okay, that's for the people that aren't the actual doers. I don't know. That's just kind of me. So
you're just focused on, let's get this deal done and working on it.
Awesome. So I was thinking about it, but I don't know how much I actually thought it was possible or how soon it could be done. I kind of scared myself because in the middle of that flip with that partner, I had told him, because he had talked about maybe offloading some of his portfolio, and I had just kept telling him throughout it, I'm like, if you ever decide to, make me your call. Well, I had all, I put $45,000 into this fourplex, and he calls me right when I had basically nothing, in the bank, because I put it all in there. He's like, hey, I'm about to sell. Do you want it? And I scared myself by saying yes. So I ultimately bought another property, but I had to raise private money to do it. And then I came back in, 6 months later after the seasoning period, put a conventional loan on it. So ultimately I got in there for zero down. But I had to do it a little bit creatively because I didn't have money at the time. And that's really what turned me on to the fact that, you can build relationships and raise money and scale. And also do it conservatively because you can bring equity partners, which to me, I enjoy a little bit more than just raising like hard money. And we can talk about some of those sorts of things. But that's ultimately, what kind of turned me on to, all right, now we can really grow and use our money strategically but use our relationships to really grow, flip houses, buy more property and things of that nature.
Yeah. So you're doing this property what did you meet your wife before you bought this property, or were you in the middle of living in this property when you and your wife met?
Yeah, so God bless my wife. I outkicked my coverage for sure. I met her right around the same time I was buying it, and so we met like 2 months before I decided to buy this property. And like I said, my wife, comes from kind of a upscale living. I don't. And so I'm driving around this beat up Cobalt talking about how I'm going to become financially free while buying this dump fourplex, and somehow she believed me. So she kind of came around there at the same time. I'll never forget, I had this unit completely gutted, and I was sleeping, place was literally completely down to the studs. And I'm sleeping on the OSB with a pillow and a blanket. And she comes in there, she's like, "You can't live like this." So she brought an air mattress. And and so I was living on the air mattress in this gutted unit for a while, but yeah.
Hey, that sounds like a keeper then, right?
Yeah.
If she put up with you through that. So, I mean, obviously she seems supportive. Was this like, hey, it's cool while you're doing it and I have my own place? I mean, like, how did this conversation develop of like, was she always on board right from the get-go, or was she on board because it was your thing? And then, I mean, how did this transition to like, I know y'all are house hacking now in a duplex, but like, how did that whole process go? Because I mean, that's one of the biggest challenges people have is one spouse will be on board and one won't, or it takes a while to get the other one on board. I mean, how did that whole transition go? And were there any little road bumps or things you had to do to help get her on board with it?
Yeah, so we have a lot of I've had my wife on the podcast a time or two, and we have a lot of conversations with other couples that are doing it. I have some in my market, and I think the biggest thing, if we're talking strictly about getting a partner on board, it's about changing your marketing approach. And I did not know that. I learned the hard way. But I would come at her with the numbers and how we can get the financial freedom and how, like, if we just buy this another unit, it adds another X amount of dollars, and then blah 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 blah. And to her, she could care less to a certain extent, right? That was not her love language. That was not her idea of life. But when I started to say, hey, listen, I can be at home with our kids more. I can leave my job more. I can, if we live here, we can then build our ultimate dream rather than having to settle for the starter home like everyone else does. You just kind of build a building block. We can live financially free, right? Like I had to change the way I had to give her the end game and kind of what this sacrifice meant. And at least for my wife and for like the Phi couple, and a lot of the other people that, we bring on the show, like that is what appeals more to their spouse was, why are we doing this? Like, what's the end goal? Not just that we make $1,000 a month, because $1,000 a month, that didn't matter to my wife. So that's how I was able to appeal to her. And it also came with a little bit of give and take. So when we got married, I had already moved into the duplex, and I was living in the 1-bed, 1-bath side. And my wife said, if we're going to live here, we're moving into the bigger side. So I hated it because at the time we were making money in the duplex. But then we moved over, and it ultimately is a great decision. So now we pay a little bit. I think it's maybe we pay the tax and insurance, so maybe $400 or $500, about $450 I think a month is what we pay to live there. But ultimately, it was a lifestyle decision. My wife's comfortable living there with our kid, for the long term, and so it's been a great decision because now she's happy, I'm happy. We're living for a fraction of the cost it would cost otherwise, and the rest of our portfolio pays for not only, of course, our house, but our lifestyle, our vehicles, things of that nature. So it's been a great decision. It's to move over. Sometimes it was a sacrifice for me. It felt like at the time it felt like a bad decision. Ultimately, it was a really good one.
How many bedrooms and bathrooms is the bigger side?
2-bed, 1-bath.
2-bed, 1-bath, and you're on the 1-1. And I mean, but to me, this is still a win, right? I mean, some folks, on the forums, they're like, "Oh, I can't make any money. It's going to cost me $300 to live there. It's not a good house hack." And to me, it's like, well, if the cost of living, average 2-bedroom across the U.S. is $1,200, and you can live in a place for $400, $500, that's a great deal because your cost of living is lower. I mean, and then you obviously had other income to pay, but you also use this duplex. And one thing I don't think people talk about enough is you can buy a multifamily or an ADU or that income suite in transition through life with your house hack. So when it was just you were on that smaller side, and then it was a little tough for you, but to make the wife happy, it was like, great. Now you switch to the other side, and earlier it was cash flowing. Now it's not quite cash flowing, but your cost of living is way cheaper if you were to go out and rent a 2-bedroom. So, I mean, this is a huge win. And let's touch back really quickly. So this duplex is a property you bought from your mentor, and this is the one that he said, "Hey, I'm getting ready to sell," and you raised private money for. So, I mean, did he ever put this property on the market, or was it literally, "Hey, I'm calling Bradley and seeing if he wants this deal"?
Yeah, I just kept telling him, "Hey, make me your first call, make me your first call, make me your first call." And so, I proved to him with that smaller deal, that I was trustworthy and that I executed on time and yada yada. And now it's morphed into me buying a commercial building from him, which exponentially is much much more expensive. And so now it's going to be this will be structured for longer term. He'll be holding a note for 10 years. But those kind of relationships, and now when I raise private money for my flips, I utilize him as a reference. Anytime I reach out to someone, my biggest my biggest concern is my personal reputation above all else. And so I turn down more private money than I ever accept, just because I want it to be a great fit for both of us. I want it to be something where we both win. And I, generally speaking, enjoy equity partners over private money because we're all in this together. We all have, we have the timelines a little bit better. They feel a little bit better about the end game. They're making a little bit more money. And ultimately, to me, it feels like more of a win-win. So that's where I reference him a lot because I've been through it. It builds relationships in the future. And I think if people out there really, really hone in on the importance of relationships long-term, not necessarily just this year, not necessarily just next year, but when you can multiply relationship building to be able to reference people, for when you're trying to get private money or when you're trying to do a seller financing deal, in the long term, it'll really, really pay dividends.
So, I mean, what's next for you? I mean, you've had a pretty cool, investing career from like having a murder in your property, starting out on the first one in 2014 to now, we're here in early 2021 of, you're living in your second house hack, you're getting ready to buy a commercial property, you've done flips. I mean, what's coming up next? I mean, have you since left the job at the big automotive company?
Yeah, left the job. For me, I'm always looking toward the future as far as like ebbs and flows of whether it's economics or just people's what people want, what people need. So the big push for buying this commercial building, starting a true in-house construction company. I didn't mention, we now have property management. So my best friend runs the property management side of things. He manages all my properties. We're building a portfolio around that. And then we have, acquisitions teams. I have a brokerage, of course, but also wholesaling deals to investors or to ourselves and things like that. So really the goal with that is to be able to be in-house, because the thing that I see, and I'm sure, you can probably appreciate this, and a lot of people out there, is that 5 years ago, I saw the writing on the wall of, labor, as far as construction labor, going down, and it'd be in huge demand at some point. And I didn't really know, I didn't see it the way I see it now. But now I look at it, and I look to like say 2030, and I'm going at this trajectory of what we're going, and how hard it is to find, find decent handymen to like turn over units, for instance. That became one of the big reasons why I wanted to get an in-house property management company with a full-time somebody to go around and service properties, was because I couldn't turn over my units. It cost me an arm and a leg just to get somebody in there to paint the property and change the flooring out. It costs, 3-4 months rent or whatever, depending on the property, of course. And I'm like, there's no way I can do this at scale at those kind of costs. I have to figure out a way to solve that problem. And I know that if I'm having that problem, many other people are having that problem. And so, in our area, there are a couple property management companies. It's tough to form, a really good solid company with a good reputation. I mean, that's a really challenging thing to do. And so that's our goal, is to do that. But the construction side of things allows us to flip when we need to flip, burr when we need to flip, burr when we need to burr, and develop when we want to develop. And so the ultimate goal is, I've been working with a lot of developers through this cycle, and with the goal of on the next cycle beginning to develop, for ourselves and raise money in-house. And so that's kind of the goal with what we're doing here. I've got some incredible people as partners on this. Like I said, with the acquisition side, that happens to be my partner. He's an engineer. He's the equity partner for our flips. And so it's just it's really starting to turn into something that we think long-term can really help us grow this area, which we all love and have vested interest in, but also doing it and making pretty good money. So that's kind of the long-term. I think labor is going to be harder and harder. A lot of the builders around here are having really, really tough time finding labor. The flippers, I know personally, the only ones that I know that are really doing well and at volume are the ones that have in-house teams. The ones that are trying to hire out, they have to deal with timelines. I mean, I just called a couple painters the other day, and a couple of them were out until July, August. And I'm like, man, how can So, anyways, I think that's going to become more and more like that way, and so that's why we're trying to do it in-house.
Awesome, man. It sounds like you got a lot going on, a lot of good stuff coming up over the next couple of years. But before we let you go, we like to ask all of our guests a set of final 6 questions. You ready for them?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So what is your favorite personal finance related resource? So blog, book, podcast in the personal finance space.
There are a lot of great people out there. I'll reference maybe the one that, got me started. Certainly isn't real estate related, but I think Dave Ramsey is a great resource for a lot of people. I had this idea a long time ago that I was going to be the middle ground between Robert Kiyosaki and Dave Ramsey. And so that's how I've always envisioned my life and my personal finance. And I know a lot of people have things to say about both sides, usually Dave Ramsey when you're talking about a real estate community. But I think in the real estate community, I think Dave Ramsey is largely mistaken, to a certain extent. Yeah. Of course, he says, I get the whole leverage part of things. But I think if you really look at the mindset that he tries to instill with all of his decisions, I think that's more important. So I read kind of, I like his books that are related to things beyond just the financial space. One that comes to mind is The Legacy Journey, where he talks about, the idea of why he does what he does, why he promotes what he promotes, and the legacy you can give to your kids and yada in family and all that. Yeah. And I think the mindset behind what he does is incredible. So I'm a fan of his from that perspective. And so I think I don't necessarily consume much of his content anymore. But that's really what got me started. As far as building a great foundation and getting me to where I am today was Dave Ramsey.
Awesome. All right. So question number 2, what is your favorite real estate related resource? Blog, book, podcast, whatever it may be.
Yeah. Bigger Pockets obviously is phenomenal. Robert Kiyosaki probably was the one that got me started. Rich Dad, Poor Dad was obviously a good book, but a lot of his other resources, I don't know, how great it is. It can be good. A lot of his books are just kind of big picture stuff. So it can be tough to get into the, nitty gritty and really figure out a direction you want to take as an individual. But for me back then, he provided me with a lot of inspiration. He provided me with a lot of sleepless nights too. I'll never forget, him and Peter Schiff and all them in 2015 in the middle of my flip. They were talking about how the economy was going to crash and it was going to be worse than 2008. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, I'm going to hold the bag. That was another inspiration for why I got into house hacking, because I'm like, man, I can't keep flipping. Otherwise, I'm going to end up with a house and I can't sell. And so, but yeah, he was a great resource for me. Big picture. helping me to understand, the cash flow quadrant, just a big picture of why we do what we want to do, Rich Don't Work for Money, things like that. And so his resources was great. But if somebody was trying to get more nitty gritty, you can't go wrong with Bigger Pockets. I mean, they have everything. The podcast is amazing. They have great webinars, and you could just go in there, get anything you're looking for, you can find.
Awesome. All right. Question number 3. What has been your favorite travel destination so far?
The Virgin Islands, U.S. Virgin Islands. It's my wife and I's favorite spot. We went there for a honeymoon. Went back there. We're planning another trip back there here relatively soon. But yeah, we love it. You drive on the left side of the road, so that's always fun. I believe it's the only spot in America where they drive on the left side of the road still. The roads are narrower. It's intense. You drive instead of like over on the other side of the pond, you're driving a car like a normal U.S. car, and so you are on the left side while driving on the left side. So it's kind of interesting, when cars are coming this way and you're in the opposite side of the vehicle. It's intense, but it's a lot of fun and it's beautiful. And that's been we watch, what's the show called? Is it just something? Anyways, HGTV has a show about the islands over
the
there.
Island properties.
Yeah. So my wife and I watch that all the time, and our goal is to one day soon buy a place over there and sort of spend a lot of time over there.
Yeah, awesome, man. Well, if you buy the place, you might have a lot of people begging you to come down and visit. So make sure to have at least an extra room or two.
Right. There's a lot of house hacks down there, man. We'll go house hack to the Virgin Islands.
Yeah. All right. So what's next, number 4 on your travel vacation list?
Well, we just bought tickets to Mexico. My sister-in-law is getting married down there, so that is next. We have, like I said, we just had our first kid, so travel is, of course, with restriction stuff, but just with a young child is tough. So I don't think we'll be traveling much. My in-laws have a beautiful, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Great Lakes here in Michigan, but it's for the Midwest. I mean, it's one of the top, if not the top travel destination. So my in-laws have, a lake home in kind of the premier destination in Michigan for the lake life and community. And so we go up there a lot. We'll be traveling up there for Mother's Day, which happens to be my wife's birthday as well. So that's next. We go up there a lot. But we'll be going to Mexico. So those are the travel plans this year.
All right. So question number 5, what is the biggest bucket list item that you have not accomplished yet?
Development, bucket list, I know a lot of people travel and things like that. For me, I just enjoy the aspect of real estate. I'm just a thoroughbred as far as like really enjoying it. So development is really kind of what has my itch right now. That's the motivation of having an in-house construction company. Of course, it helps with flips. Of course, it helps with rehabbing rentals and things like that. But or even doing projects. But none of that really excites me overly. What really excites me is developing. Whether that's commercially, whether that's residential, and some subdivisions and things like that. And so now that I have the capacity for private lending, and the relationships and people trust me and like every flip I'll have 2 or 3 people out just to say, hey, this is what I'm doing. Here's my personal finances. Here's the numbers on this place. Here's some references. Let's just build a relationship. Let's see if something happens. And like you said earlier, I forget the exact quote you said, but when you ask for money, usually you get advice. And I think you might have said, when you ask for advice, you might get money or something like that. And so, I live by a similar model. I generally never ask somebody for money without first bringing them along for my personal journey to say, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is why other people trust me. Here are those other people. Here's their stories about their dealings with me. Here's my personal finances. Here's my credit score. Here's the money we have in the bank. Here are my, my rental portfolio. Here's how all this is performing. Trust me, and then the deal, like the deal second. That's how I structure it. That's what I want from people. Like, the deals, they come and go. But the true players, I think, last, sort of forever. And that might be a cliche thing to say, but like, I just want people to trust me and then the deal second. And so, so that's really where my itch is development. And I think I can do that by relationships with, people just investing in us.
Awesome. And then the sixth and final question is, what is your favorite life hack?
Life hack. Probably. So I talked about that Mexico trip. I love credit card hacking, to a certain degree. I'm not like some of these people that really, really thoroughly know it. I do just the basics. I love Chase personally. It's easy. I bank there anyway. But for instance, we just paid for first class tickets, in Delta, plus our stay out there through Chase, through this most recent flip. I got one of Chase business credit cards, and plus the points we had. The majority of trips we take, like going to the Virgin Islands, we usually pay for with our credit card points
and miles,
from our renovations. So to me, like, being kind of the relatively frugal person that I am, like that really like gets me pumped. That because I would never pay first class ever. I don't value travel that much, from that perspective, as far as like getting to the destination. But if I can pay for it through a credit card, I get really jacked, and I usually fly first class.
Yeah, awesome. I'll put it in the show notes for anyone listening, but we actually have a whole series of articles. I think it's 3 or 4 articles specifically on credit card reward hacking and pairing it with real estate. It's a way just to supercharge it. So I'll throw those in the show notes. Bradley, man, if people want to check you out, find out more about you, where's the best place for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can get in touch with me with my personal account, Bradley the Brief, Facebook, Instagram, House Hacking Success. Come join the community if you want. It's been amazing to see the amount of just people reach out and the kind of questions we can answer and the kind of partnerships across the country like yourself and relationships we've been able to grow. So really, anyway, personally, I'll probably get back to you personally sooner if you hit me up on my personal accounts. House Hacking Success, hit us up. Join the community. If you're somebody that's house hacking and wants to, I'm sure they've been on your show, you can come hang out with us and talk about your story as well. But just I'm just a relationship person. This is something that really it inspires me to be around people like yourself that are doing it, and that's really the origination of doing this. And so I enjoy seeing people succeed. I enjoy having people push me, and so hit me up on either of those, and I'll get back with you guys.
Awesome, and we'll put the link to all of Bradley's Instagram, Facebook, and everything in the show notes. So definitely check those out. Man, awesome having you on. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad we were finally able to do it. It took us about a year to get you on, but we finally did it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, man. It's a blessing. I hope people see the bigger picture of what this provides. It is a sacrifice, can be challenging. There are issues. But it's and of course it's a tough market. We didn't talk a whole lot about the current situation. It's just tough for people. It's tough for people trying to house hack right now because a lot of the landlords don't want to mess around with owner occupied loans and things like that. So it can be challenging. I get it. It's frustrating. But I personally believe it's worth it. Sometimes you got to be creative. I think more than ever, getting around the right kind of people is important. Somebody that's already done it, that can really kind of advise you on being creative and getting in a good situation. But it's worth it. You can do it. And Andrew, I appreciate you having me on.
Awesome, man.